last weekend I mentioned that Sunday was our fall festival. I didn't realize at the time that there's also a fun run going through the streets of Eureka, so a few roads will be closed at different times. So if you're coming to Mass here, go to the Eureka homepage and find out when, and or you can, if you get our email blast, we'll have a little PDF of those times as well. And this Sunday, the Fall Festival Day, is also my birthday, and it just reminded me of how my birthday fell on the same date as our Fall Festival in Assumption once. And this is like 20 plus years ago, whatever-ish. And some folks were trying to guess my age. And I said, no, I'm not telling. You guys got to keep some secrets. But they pressed. They said, finally, give us a clue. I thought my line was pretty good. This one lady had the best response. I said, okay, I'll give you one clue. I go, this is a big year for me. They go, what? I go, this is the year that my age caught up with my IQ. They laughed. One lady says, gosh, I would have never guessed you were that young. Love that. Anyway, for anyone who watches this, I consider myself one of the most blessed people ever. And that you have been and are a part of that blessing. For this homily, this interesting question, I think, what household item most closely resembles a follower of Jesus? And thanks for joining us. The question I asked just a second ago, I don't know if you've had a chance to think, but if so, what would you say? What household item most closely resembles a follower of Jesus? Well, if you were at a Mass some years ago when I asked that question of kids, you might remember some of their answers. Two of the answers that I remember, maybe not word for word, but I loved these. One kid said, a light bulb. I said, why? Because Jesus helps us find our way in the dark. It's really, actually, brilliant. Another kid said, a blanket, because it comforts us when we're scared or lonely. I thought those were beautiful. Now, I'm not sure they will remember mine, but if you asked me what household item most closely resembles a follower of Jesus, I would say this. Behold, the plunger. I would. Think about it. It's great for fixing drains, wonderful for unclogging the kitchen sink, kind of opening up that thing we sometimes called thrones to make them usable again. And it's great for any follower of Jesus who, like those two in today's gospel, wanted to sit on thrones themselves, thrones of glory, places of honor. And why do I think that Jesus would appreciate this as a metaphor for him, or at least an image for him? Because I think that this captures not only how Jesus lived, but the role he invites his followers to have. It shows at least what mattered to him, right? I would suggest it does in these three ways. Number one, first, there's no way to carry this proudly, right? You certainly don't want to grip it on the rubber part because you know where it's been and what it's done. So, don't worry, this one has never been used before. It would look rather silly, I think, to carry it on a pillow as if it were some regal thing. Who would carry it that way? No, we typically would grab it by the handle and carry it like this, right? As if it were a sword, but then we'd look like a soldier in some sort of silly army. By its physical design, it's almost impossible to carry this as a thing of honor, right? Some sense of entitlement. Not so, right? Number one, the plunger is not a thing of pride. And Jesus warns us against that, right? Invites us instead to follow his humble way of service. The second way I'd suggest this is like what Jesus stood for and how he lived is because of the kinds of stuff that he did often, right? Just the kind of stuff we do when using the plunger. Not glorious, but humble. Messy, sometimes smelly. Enough said. And number three, when the job is done, no one is excited about the plunger. No, we're just relieved that the sink is working again, that the throne is flushable, right? Or whatever was stopped up is now flowing. No one says, yay, plunger. We're just glad those are working again. And so we just kind of put it back in its place and get on with our days, right? No one's like, let's celebrate the plunger for a bit. I'll leave it here to celebrate the plunger a bit. And this is how Jesus lived and what he preached, right? You know, he'd be there caring for the brokenhearted and those broken in body and in welcoming in those who were left out or excluded. He was always thinking about them, not about how he was being perceived, what people thought of him, right? So when the two disciples come forward today looking for places of honor, Jesus says in effect, nah, how about instead you just be like plungers? Jesus goes on, you know how the rulers lord it over others to make their authority felt? Not for you. You are to be like me, for the Son of God did not come to be served, but to serve, and to be like a plunger. For Jesus' greatness is only measured in service. And, boy, hear me if you can. Jesus would tell us each that the humble path of service is the way to joy. It is the way to a meaningful and joy-filled life. I don't know how to stress how crucial that is, right? That this humble path, unlike what we are told often, right, or what we think, the humble path is the way to deep joy. To be personal for a moment, often what I'm preaching about suddenly affects me, or changes me, or invites me to think or act differently over time, right? Not long ago I had one of those days, with many, many blessings, of course, but also more aggravations than normal, some significant bad behavior to deal with, a couple of unusual and significant challenges. And it was one more in a series of 14 to 16 hour work days that left me going to bed further behind than when I started. And I was trying to get ready for bed and tired and kind of fighting the temptation to be crabby or to maybe feel a bit sorry for myself, which is not something I really do, but there it was. And I remembered that I wanted to use this as a metaphor in the homily, as a way to imagine following Jesus. So I thought about that for myself, and I talked to myself, and I said, well, Joe, maybe this really is a good day with all of those challenges and stuff, because that's your job. That's how you've chosen to be. That's how a follower of Jesus would be. That's how you want to be. And honestly, that kind of helped. Because deep down I really do want to be like him. And that's the kind of day he often had, right? Now, for the sake of full disclosure, it helped, but it like, even after all of that, even after talking to myself that way, I still felt a little bit of aggravated at the lack of progress I'd made during the day. So anyway, now I'm brushing my teeth to get ready for bed, and somehow, for some reason, I find myself remembering Ted Molitor. Some years ago, I did the funeral services for Ted's younger brother, Artie. Artie died at age 61. Artie had Down syndrome and lived at home with Ted. Now, Ted was a kind, gentle man, quiet, who, in addition to his role as a teacher, took care of his aged mom until her death and Artie until his. Now, a couple of weeks after the funeral, I said, Ted, what's it like to be you now since Artie died? And as an aside, that's a good way to ask somebody how they're doing when they've had a loved one die. Not to presume we know the answer or to give some kind of a cliche. I just like that question. So anyway, that's the question I asked Ted. I go, Ted, what's it like to be you, a couple weeks after burying Artie? And he moved me deeply with his answer. He said, I am so grateful, Father. You see, Artie needed me, and there was no one else to care for him. And then he started crying. He said, for years, my prayer has been that I would live at least one day longer than Artie. And I'm just so thankful that I did. So now, I'm remembering that moment and brushing my teeth with tears in my eyes. And I think, I am so blessed to have this day I had. And my problems are small, and my blessings are countless. And even though it's not fun, sometimes it is my job to, like my Jesus, be more like a plunger, right? That's my calling. That's how I want to be. It's my delight. So, this week you might consider taking out your plunger, and if it's new, putting it on the dining room table for a couple of days, or you wouldn't think I'd have to add that if it's the new part, but anyway, or put it at the foot of your cross on the wall or near the door, just somewhere to remind you, at least for a few days until you don't notice it anymore, right? And let the plunger remind us of the secret of the Son of God, who never once said, worship me, but who said, follow me. Jesus, who came not to be served, but to serve, and who wants us to know the joy of following his way.